One eye, one man, one city filled with 1,500 German soldiers. Logic says he should have died in the first 5 minutes. The Canadian High Command told him it was a suicide mission, a distraction to buy time for the real army. But Leo Major didn't do distractions. He didn't just walk into the city of Zwolle, he turned it into a nightmare for the Nazis. By sunrise, the German army was fleeing in terror, convinced they were being hunted by an entire regiment. How did a single man with a broken back and one eye pull off the greatest bluff in military history? And why did he refuse the highest military honor a soldier can receive? To understand the miracle of Zwolle, we have to go back to the moment Leo Major decided that death simply wasn't an option. The air in the command tent is thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and the stifling weight of unearned authority. General Bernard Montgomery, the Spartan general, the hero of El Alamein, stands stiffly, holding a Distinguished Conduct Medal. He expects a salute. He expects gratitude. Instead, he's met with a glare from a single, piercing blue eye. Leo Major stands there, mud-caked and smelling of cordite, his left eye covered by a makeshift patch. He doesn't look like a war hero. He looks like a man who just finished a bar fight with the devil and won. "Keep it," Leo says, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. The room goes silent. You don't tell Monty to keep a medal. "I'm sorry?" the general stammers. "I'm not taking a medal from a man like you. You're incompetent. You're a poor leader. If this is the prize for following your orders, I'd rather have nothing." Leo turns his back on the most powerful commander in the British Empire and walks out into the rain. He isn't interested in being a hero. He's interested in being a professional. And in Leo's world, professionals don't need pieces of tin to tell them they're the best. To understand the man who told a general to shove it, you have to go back to 1940, Montreal, Canada. While other boys were joining the Canadian Army out of a sense of king and country, Leo Major was joining because he was bored. He was a 19-year-old with a chip on his shoulder the size of Mount Royal and a temper that made his father look like a saint. Leo didn't care about the geopolitics of the Third Reich. He cared about the fact that he was faster, stronger, and meaner than any man he'd ever met. The army wasn't a calling, it was a challenge. He wanted to see if the world's greatest conflict was big enough to hold him. He enlisted with the Régiment de la Chaudière. From day one, his instructors knew they didn't have a soldier, they had a problem. Leo didn't march, he prowled. He didn't follow the manual, he rewrote it in his head. While his peers were fumbling with their Lee Enfields in the mud of Quebec, Leo was feeling the weight of the bolt, the cold bite of the steel against his cheek, and the exact moment the trigger broke. He didn't just hit the target, he wanted to own it. By the time the regiment moved to Scotland for advanced training, Leo found his true calling: scout sniper. This wasn't just shooting, this was the art of the ghost. Imagine the Scottish Highlands. The mist is so thick you can't see your own hand. The ground is a peat bog that swallows boots and spirits alike. Most soldiers hated it. Leo Major loved it. He would disappear for days, living off the land, moving through the brush like a shadow. The smell? Gun oil, damp wool, and the metallic tang of the North Sea. The sound, the rhythmic click-clack of a bolt action, and the silence of a man who has learned to breathe with the wind. His instructors tried to break him. They sent their best hunter units to find him during exercises. Leo didn't just evade them, he hunted them. He would sneak into the enemy camps at night, leave a chalk mark on the commander's tent, and steal their rations just to prove he could. He became the hunter of hunters. He was a man who understood that in war there are two types of people, those who wait to be killed and those who do the killing. Leo had no intention of being the former. He refined his craft until he could hit a moving target at 600 yards while his heart rate barely flickered. He learned to move so silently that even the birds didn't fly away when he passed. But he was still a bad boy. He spent more time in the brig for insubordination than he did in the mess hall. He fought his sergeants. He mocked his officers. He was a weapon that the Canadian Army didn't know how to aim, and they were starting to get nervous. "Major," one officer reportedly told him, "you're either going to win the war or start a new one." Leo just smirked. He didn't care about the war yet. He was just waiting for the stage to get big enough. The wait ended in the dark, early hours of June 6th. The English Channel is a churning, gray washing machine of vomit and adrenaline. Leo sits in a landing craft assault, LCA, headed for a stretch of sand codenamed Juno Beach. Around him, men are praying, crying, or losing their breakfast into their helmets. Leo sits perfectly still. He is checking his rifle, one last time. The smell of diesel fumes and salt spray is suffocating. Through the salt-crusted slits of the landing craft, the French coastline begins to emerge through the fog. It isn't a romantic sight. It's a wall of concrete, barbed wire, and MG-42 machine guns capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute. The Hitler's buzzsaw begins to wail in the distance. The ramp starts to groan. The chains begin to unspool. This is the moment where the training ends and the legend begins. For most, this is a nightmare. For Leo Major, this is the first day of the rest of his life. The ramp hits the water with a deafening thud. "Move!" someone screams. Leo Major doesn't run. He steps out into the chaos, his rifle held low, his eyes scanning for the flash of a muzzle. The water is red before his boots even hit the sand. The world is ending. Leo is just getting started. The ramp of the LCA doesn't just drop, it collapses into the surf like the jaw of a dying beast. For months, the soldiers of the Régiment de la Chaudière lived in a world of theory. Now, theory is replaced by a physical wall of sound. The thud, thud, thud of heavy mortars hitting the surf vibrates in Leo's marrow. The air is no longer oxygen. It's a toxic soup of atomized seawater, diesel exhaust, and the copper tang of blood. Leo hits the water, its chest deep and freezing, a shock to the system that would paralyze a lesser man. To his left, a soldier is dragged under by the weight of his pack, his eyes wide and pleading before the tide claims him. Leo doesn't look back. He can't. He moves with a predatory grace that defies the chaos. While others scramble for the sea wall, huddled and praying, Leo is reading the beach. He's looking for the gaps between the tracers, those glowing red lines of death stitching the air. He reaches the shingle, the stones clicking under his boots like rolling dice. He's not thinking about survival. He's thinking about the objective. "Keep your heads down," a sergeant screams. Leo ignores him. He didn't come here to hide. He came here to work. By midday, the beach is a graveyard, but the inland push has begun. The French countryside is a maze of bocage, thick ancient hedgerows that turn every field into a kill box. Leo is scouting ahead, miles past the safety of the main Canadian line. He's alone, just the way he likes it. Through the dense greenery, he hears it, the rhythmic, mechanical clatter of a half-track, a Hanamag. Most scouts would mark the position and retreat. Leo feels the familiar itch of the rebel. He doesn't retreat. He sinks into the shadows. He moves through the brush with the silence of a mountain lion, his heartbeat slow, his breath controlled. He watches the vehicle settle into a concealed position. 4 Germans climb out, laughing, thinking they're safe behind their own lines. They aren't. They're in Leo's world now. He doesn't use his rifle, too loud. He moves in close, the smell of German cigarettes and engine grease filling his nostrils. In a blur of motion, Leo is on them. It isn't a fight, it's an execution of precision. A few moments later, the German squad is neutralized, and Leo is standing over the Hanamag. He climbs inside and finds something better than ammunition, a satchel full of documents, enigma-coded logs and communication maps. When he eventually drives that armored beast back into the Canadian camp, single-handedly, the officers are speechless. He hasn't just captured a vehicle, he's captured the German High Command's diary. It's a win that should have earned him a month of leave. But Leo doesn't want leave, he wants the next fight. 2 days later, the luck of Leo Major finally flickers. He's scouting a village outskirts when he encounters a German patrol. A firefight breaks out, sharp, jagged, and terrifyingly close. A German soldier, cornered and desperate, fumbles a phosphorus grenade. It hits the wall inches from Leo's head. Hiss! In an instant, the world is erased. There is no sound, only a blinding, searing white light that feels like it's being poured directly into his brain. Phosphorus doesn't just burn, it eats. It's a chemical fire that feeds on oxygen and flesh, hissing as it melts through the air. Leo screams, a raw animal sound. His left eye feels like a hot coal has been pressed into the socket. He can smell his own skin bubbling. The pain is so absolute, it becomes a spiritual agony. I'm blind, he thinks. For a split second, the soldier who wouldn't die feels the cold touch of fear. If I can't see, I'm just a target. If I'm a target, I'm dead. The world goes black. Leo wakes up in a field hospital. The smell of ether and rot is overwhelming. His head is wrapped in thick, blood-stained gauze. A medical officer stands over him, checking a clipboard with the detached pity of a man who has seen too much. "You're a lucky man, Major," the doctor says, his voice muffled by a surgical mask. "The phosphorus took the left eye, but the right one is intact, mostly." Leo tries to sit up, his hand instinctively reaching for the bandages. "Don't touch those," the doctor snaps. "You're being processed for evacuation. We'll get you on a boat back to England, then home to Montreal. You've done your bit. You're blind in one eye, son. Your war is over." Leo freezes. Montreal? The quiet streets? The judgmental stares of a civilian life he never fit into? He thinks of the Hanomag. He thinks of the men still on the line. He thinks of the hunter of hunters being sent home like a broken toy. He rips the IV from his arm. The doctor gasps. "I'm not going back," Leo growls, his voice like grinding stones. "You have no choice. You can't see. You're a liability." Leo stands up, swaying, the world tilting in his remaining eye. He looks the doctor dead in the face, a one-eyed stare that carries the weight of a loaded pistol. "I only need one eye to see through a scope," Leo says. He doesn't wait for a discharge. He doesn't wait for permission. He finds a discarded uniform, grabs a fresh rifle, and walks out of the tent into the rain. Leo finds a piece of black fabric and ties it over his left socket. He looks in a shard of a broken mirror. The man staring back isn't the rebellious kid from Montreal anymore. With the black patch and the scarred, hardened face, he looks like something out of an ancient Norse myth. He looks like Odin, the god who traded an eye for secret knowledge. He doesn't look like a victim. He looks like a nightmare. The men of the Régiment de la Chaudière watch him walk back into camp. They don't cheer, they don't clap, they move out of his way in a stunned, respectful silence. They realize that the man who wouldn't die had become something even more dangerous, a man who had already lost everything he had to lose. Leo picks up his Lee Enfield and strokes the bolt. The world is half as wide as it used to be, but for a sniper, that doesn't matter. The focus is narrower, the target is clearer. "Where are the Germans?" Leo asks his sergeant. "About 3 miles east, Leo, in the woods." Leo nods, adjusts the black patch, and vanishes into the tree line. The ghost is back on the hunt. If Normandy was a battle, the Scheldt was a slow-motion execution. The Netherlands in the autumn of 1944 is not a place for men. It is a place for monsters. The landscape is a flat, sodden graveyard with a line between land and water has been erased. The dikes have been blown, flooding the polders with freezing, brackish water. The mud here is different. It's a thick, gray slurry that tastes of salt and decay. It swallows boots, jams rifles, and rots the feet off living men. Above it all, a relentless, bone-chilling rain falls from a sky the color of a bruised lung. In this environment, the German defenders are invisible. They sit in concrete pillboxes or hide in the rafters of flooded farmhouses, picking off Canadian soldiers who are forced to move across open dikes with no cover. For the average infantryman, the Scheldt is a nightmare. For Leo Major, the man with one eye and a soul made of flint, it is a playground. While his regiment shivers in waterlogged trenches, Leo disappears. He is the only thing in the Netherlands more dangerous than the mud. The mission was simple, or so the brass thought. Find a squad of missing recruits who had vanished into the mist. Leo strikes out alone. He moves through the darkness, the water waist-high, his Lee Enfield held above his head. He doesn't look for the missing Canadians, he looks for the reason they disappeared. He finds it in a small village on the outskirts of the German lines, but he doesn't find a patrol, he finds a garrison. Through his one good eye, Leo counts them. 10, 20, 50. There are nearly 100 German soldiers hunkered down in the ruins. Any sane man would slip away and call in an artillery strike, but Leo Major doesn't play by the rules of sanity. He plays by the rules of the hunt. He waits, he watches, he breathes with the rhythm of the rain. He spots a German officer stepping away from the main group for a smoke. In a flash of movement, Leo is behind him, a cold knife edge against the throat, a gloved hand over the mouth. Silence, Leo whispers in French-accented German, or you're a corpse. Leo doesn't kill him, he uses him. He forces the officer to walk back toward the garrison. Leo stays in the shadows, his rifle pressed into the officer's spine. Tell them to surrender, Leo commands. Tell them they are surrounded by a Canadian battalion. Tell them if they don't lay down their arms right now, the artillery will turn this village into a crater. It is a lie, a massive, staggering, suicidal bluff. Leo is one man in a puddle. The officer, terrified by the cold steel and the phantom-like figure behind him, screams the order. One by one, the Germans emerge. They are tired, cold, and broken by the war. They see the shadow in the trees, they see their officer's terror, and they believe the lie.
They drop their rifles. The silence of the Dutch night is shattered by the sound of boots. 93. That is the final count. 93 German soldiers, including 3 officers, marching in a column, their hands behind their heads. Leading them, like a shepherd leading wolves to the slaughter, is a single Canadian soldier with a black eye patch. The tension is a physical weight. Leo's heart is hammering against his ribs, but his face is a mask of stone. He knows that if even one German realizes there is no battalion, that there is only one man with a bolt-action rifle, the march will turn into a massacre. Halfway back to the Canadian lines, an SS officer in the group decides he's seen enough. He realizes the battalion in the woods hasn't fired a shot. He reaches for a concealed Luger, his eyes burning with fanaticism. He never clears leather. Leo doesn't hesitate. He doesn't give a warning. He fires from the hip. The crack of the Enfield echoes across the flooded fields, and the SS officer drops into the mud, a neat hole between his eyes. Leo cycles the bolt. Clack, clack, the sound of a predator clicking its teeth. He stares down the remaining 92 men. Next, he asks. No one moves. The column continues the march. When Leo finally reaches the Canadian outposts, the sentries nearly fire on him, thinking it's a German counterattack. When they realized it's just Leo hauling in an entire company of prisoners, the shock is so profound it borders on comedy. One man, 93 prisoners. It is the greatest, what moment in military history. News of the ghost of the Scheldt travels fast. It reaches the very top. A few days later, Leo is told to clean up. General Bernard Montgomery wants to pin the Distinguished Conduct Medal on his chest. For a boy from Montreal, this is the pinnacle. This is the moment you tell your grandkids about. Leo stands in front of the general. Montgomery, with his pressed uniform and his aura of self-importance, reaches for the medal. "I won't take it," Leo says, his voice flat. The officers in the room stop breathing. Montgomery freezes. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me," Leo says, stepping closer, his one eye boring into the general's soul. "You're incompetent, Monty. You sent my boys into the meat grinder at Kane because you wanted to be a hero. You don't know the first thing about the man on the ground. I'm not taking a medal from a man who wastes lives for his own ego." Leo turns and walks out. He didn't do it for the medal. He didn't do it for the king. He did it for the Chaudiers, the boys who were dying in the mud while the generals drank tea in chateaus. To Leo, a medal from Montgomery wasn't an honor. It was an insult to the dead. Leo returns to the front. He feels untouchable. He survived Juno Beach. He survived Phosphorus, and he's captured a small army by himself. He starts to believe his own myth. He starts to think he is a ghost that bullets can't find. But the Scheldt isn't finished with him. Late one night, while riding in a Bren gun carrier near the front lines, the world turns upside down. A massive explosion, a German landmine rips through the floor of the vehicle. Leo is tossed into the air like a rag doll. He hits the frozen ground, and for the first time in the war, he can't get back up. His back is broken. His ankles are shattered. As he lies there in the freezing Dutch mud, the darkness closing in, Leo Major realizes that even ghosts can be broken.
By February 1945, the Nazi war machine is a cornered animal, wounded, desperate, and lashing out with everything it has left. But Leo Major doesn't care about the big picture. He cares about the road ahead. He's riding in a Bren gun carrier, a light armored tractor, rattling across a frozen dirt track near the German border. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe. The engine's roar is the only thing keeping the silence of the Dutch wasteland at bay. Then the world ends. Boom! It's not just a sound, it's a physical weight that slams into the bottom of the vehicle. A German anti-tank mine designed to rip through the hulls of 30-ton Panzers detonates directly beneath Leo's seat. The explosion is a white-hot fist. It twists the heavy steel plating like wet cardboard. Leo is launched into the freezing air, a human projectile thrown 30 feet into a drainage ditch. Then comes the silence, that ringing hollow void where the world used to be. Leo tries to move. His brain sends the signal, "Get up, get your rifle." But the wires are cut. A jagged, white-hot lightning bolt of agony shoots up his spine, paralyzing his lungs. He looks down. His boots are pointing in directions no human feet should point. The soldier who wouldn't die is finally broken. The army hospital in Belgium is a factory of misery. The air is thick with the scent of rubbing alcohol, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of blood. The lead surgeon looks at Leo's x-rays and shakes his head. It's a miracle the man is breathing, let alone conscious. The diagnosis? His back is snapped in 3 places. 4 ribs are shattered. Both ankles are smashed into a mosaic of bone and grit. "You're done, Major," the doctor says, his voice flat with exhaustion. "We're putting you in a body cast. You'll be lucky if you ever walk to the dinner table again, let alone a battlefield. You're going back to Canada, for good this time." Leo lies there, staring at the ceiling. The pain is a constant screaming noise in his head. Most men would thank God for this wound, the $1 million wound. It was a ticket out of the slaughterhouse with honor.
But Leo thinks of the Chaudiers. He thinks of his friends, the ones who didn't have his luck, the ones still crouching in freezing foxholes while the SS prepares for a final stand. To Leo, Leaving now isn't going home, it's desertion. It's an admission that the enemy finally found something he couldn't survive. His spite is more powerful than the morphine. 3 weeks later, midnight. The ward is silent, punctuated only by the wet coughs of dying men and the soft footfalls of a night nurse 2 halls away. Leo Major isn't in his bed, he's on the floor. He had spent the last week practicing. Every time the nurses turned their backs, he would grit his teeth until they cracked, forcing his broken back to move, inches at a time. Now, it's time to go. Imagine the sheer, agonizing willpower, a man with a broken spine and shattered ankles, dragging himself across a cold linoleum floor. He's sweating through his thin hospital gown, his fingernails digging into the cracks between tiles. He finds his clothes in a storage locker. Every movement is a fresh hell. Putting on his boots feels like driving nails into his feet. He doesn't use the door. He slips out a window, falling into the mud outside. He doesn't cry out. He just breathes, ragged, shallow gasps of freezing Belgian air. He limps toward the road, hitching a ride on a passing supply truck. He doesn't tell the driver where he's going. He doesn't have to. There's only one direction: forward. Leo doesn't go straight back to the regiment. He knows he's too weak to fight yet. He needs a sanctuary. He finds it in the home of a Dutch family in a liberated village. They are starving, their faces hollowed out by years of Nazi occupation, but they open their door to the one-eyed Canadian with the terrifying stare. For a month, Leo becomes a phantom of the household. He hides in the cellar when patrols pass by. The family shares their meager rations of tulip bulbs and watery soup. Leo shares his stories and his unbreakable spirit. He becomes their protector, and they become his healers. He sits by the fire, fueled by black coffee and a burning, obsessive need to finish what he started. He resets his own physical limits. He walks the length of the cellar over and over until the bones in his ankles knit together out of sheer intimidation. He isn't just a soldier recovering, he is a weapon being reforged. April 1945, the headquarters of the Régiment de la Chaudière. Colonel Taschereau is looking over casualty reports when the door creaks open. He looks up, and the color drains from his face. Standing in the doorway is a man who should be in a grave, or at the very least a wheelchair. Leo Major is thin, his face a map of new scars, his black eye patch slightly frayed. He's leaning on a cane, but his one good eye is burning with a familiar, dangerous light. "Major?" the colonel whispers. "We had you listed as evacuated, non-recoverable." Leo tosses his cane under the colonel's desk. He reaches for a Lee Enfield leaning against the wall and slaps a magazine into the well. The sound clack-clink is the sound of a death sentence. "The doctors were wrong," Leo says, his voice a low growl. He doesn't ask for a hot meal. He doesn't ask for his back pay. He looks the colonel in the eye and asks the only question that matters to a man who has conquered death. Where is the front line? The colonel points to a map. Ahead of them lies the Isle River, and beyond that, a fortress. The city is Zwolle. It's a strategic nightmare, a medieval city turned into a Nazi stronghold, garrisoned by 1,500 German troops and SS units. The Canadian High Command is planning a massive artillery barrage to level the city before the infantry moves in. They expect thousands of casualties, both Canadian and Dutch civilians. Leo looks at the horizon. He can see the spires of the city in the distance, glowing faintly under the moonlight. To the generals, Zwolle is a target on a map. To Leo, it's a challenge. He knows that if he doesn't do something, the city will burn. He decides, right then and there, that he isn't going to let that happen. The soldier who wouldn't die is about to attempt something that isn't just impressive, it's impossible. He isn't going to take the city with an army, he's going to take it by himself. April 13th, 1945, the outskirts of Zwolle. The air is stagnant, heavy with the scent of wet soot and anticipation. To the Canadian High Command, Zwolle is a problem to be solved with math. 1,500 German defenders plus 50,000 Dutch civilians equals one massive artillery barrage. They are ready to rain steel until the city is a flat, gray smear on the map.
Leo Major can't let that happen. He knows the Chaudières don't want to kill civilians, and he knows he doesn't want to see another city burn. He volunteers to scout the town with his best friend, Willie Arsenault. The plan? Sneak in, find the German positions, and report back. The reality: the war has one more nightmare left for Leo. By 11 p.m., they are at the city limits. A German outpost flickers in the dark. Willie moves left, Leo moves right. Suddenly, the silence is shattered. A German MG-42 opens up a rip in the fabric of the night. Willie is caught in the crossfire. Leo finds him in the dirt. His friend, his brother. Willie is gone. For a moment, the world is silent. There is no grief, not yet. Grief is a luxury for men who aren't surrounded by enemies. Instead, something inside Leo clicks. The soldier who wouldn't die evaporates, and in his place stands a force of nature. The scouting mission is dead. The revenge mission has begun. Leo looks at the gates of Zwolle. He has a Sten submachine gun, a sack of grenades, and enough rage to power a division. He doesn't go back for help. He goes in. Run, fire, reload, repeat. Leo enters the city like a ghost in a machine. He knows the psychology of fear. If you hear a shot from the north, you look north. If a grenade explodes in the south 10 seconds later, you think there are 2 men. If 10 explosions happen in 10 different courtyards in 3 minutes, you think you're being invaded by a battalion. He sprints down the narrow cobblestone alleys. The sound of his boots is a frantic slap, slap, slap against the stone, echoing off the medieval walls. The tactic: he bursts into a square, lets fly a long burst from his Sten gun, rat-tat-tat-tat, and disappears into an alley before the shells hit the ground. The chaos: he hurls a grenade into a German barracks, then loops around the block to fire on the survivors from the opposite side. The German garrison, already on edge and hearing the invaders everywhere, begins to panic. They aren't fighting a soldier, they are fighting a soundscape. To the Germans huddled in the dark, the Canadians are in the basements, on the rooftops, and behind every corner. Leo is a blur. He's sweating through his tunic, his lungs burning, his one eye scanning the dark for the flicker of a helmet. He is the commander, the infantry, and the artillery all at once.
By 1 a.m., the city is a hive of confusion. Leo spots a German officer's car and hijacks it, capturing the driver. He forces the man to leave him to a local tavern, a known haunt for the German brass. Leo kicks the door open. The room is filled with the smell of cheap schnapps and stale smoke. A dozen German officers freeze, their glasses halfway to their lips. They see a man who looks like he climbed out of the pits of hell, mud-caked, eyes bloodshot, a black patch over one eye, and a Sten gun leveled at their chests. Leo doesn't scream. He's terrifyingly calm. He grabs an officer, shoves him toward the center of the room, and uses his captured driver to translate. "Tell them," Leo growls, "tell them the Canadian Army is at the gates. Tell them the artillery is dialed in. In 2 hours, the city becomes a graveyard. If they want to live, they leave, now." He leans in close to the highest-ranking officer, the barrel of the Sten gun inches from the man's throat. "I'm the only thing standing between you and 1,000 angry Canadians," Leo lies. "Run while you still can." He turns around and walks out the door. He doesn't look back. He knows the seed of doubt is planted. In war, panic is more infectious than any plague. Leo isn't finished. He heads for the Gestapo headquarters. If the German army is the muscle, the Gestapo is the rot. He finds the building, a cold, imposing structure that has been the site of countless interrogations and deaths over the last 4 years. He clears the building with a ruthless efficiency. He doesn't want prisoners. He wants the machine to stop. He finds the filing cabinets, the lists of collaborators, the execution orders, the records of the secret police. He piles them in the center of the floor. He strikes a match. The nest of snakes goes up in a roar of orange flame.
As the building burns, the light spills out into the streets of Zwolle. For the Dutch citizens watching from behind their curtains, the sight of the Gestapo headquarters in flames is the first sign of the dawn. The shadow that has loomed over them for years is literally turning to ash. Leo stands in the street, the firelight dancing in his one blue eye. He looks like a modern-day Odin watching the world burn. By 4 a.m., the German commander has had enough. Reports are flooding in, the Gestapo is gone, the officers are fleeing, there are gunfights on every street, the Canadians are everywhere. He gives the order, withdraw. A massive column of German vehicles and infantry begins to stream out of the eastern side of the city. They are terrified, looking over their shoulders for the army that has been harassing them all night. They leave behind their ammunition, their heavy gear, and their pride. Leo watches them leave from the shadows of a church. He is exhausted, his back is screaming, his ankles are swollen to the size of grapefruit. He has fired hundreds of rounds and thrown dozens of grenades. He is one man who has just bluffed 1,500 soldiers into a retreat. The sun begins to crest the horizon. The blue, jagged shadows of the night are replaced by a soft, golden glow that touches the spires of the great church. The air is suddenly, jarringly still. The smell of cordite and smoke lingers, but the clack-clack of the Sten gun has stopped. Leo walks into the center of the Grote Markt, the city's main square. He is covered in the soot of the Gestapo fire. His uniform is shredded. He leans against his rifle, his head down, the weight of Willie's death finally beginning to settle in his chest. He looks around. The streets are empty. No Germans, no Canadians, just the quiet hum of a city waking up from a 4-year nightmare. Slowly, a window opens, then another. A Dutch woman steps out onto a balcony. She sees the man in the center of the square, the one-eyed soldier with the Canadian maple leaf on his shoulder. "Is it over?" she whispers. Leo Major looks up at the rising sun. He doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a man who did a job. "Yeah," he says, his voice a dry rasp. "It's over." He realizes then that he has done the impossible. He has liberated an entire city, saved 50,000 lives, and avenged his friend, and he did it all before breakfast. He is alone in the square, a single shadow in a city of gold. The ghost of Zwolle has finished his hunt. The war in Europe is a fading scar on the collective memory of the world. Leo Major has traded his Lee Enfield for a toolbox, living a quiet, unassuming life as a pipe fitter. He is a man of routine, a husband, a shadow moving through the snowy streets of Quebec. To his neighbors, he's just Leo, the guy with the eye patch who doesn't talk much. But across the world, the 38th parallel is screaming. The Korean War has ignited, and the Canadian Army finds itself facing a new kind of nightmare, a human wave of Chinese and North Korean forces that seems endless. The brass in Ottawa are desperate. They don't just need soldiers, they need the man who specializes in the impossible. They reach out to Leo with a request: join an elite scout sniper unit. Most men, having already lost an eye and broken their back for their country, would have slammed the door. Leo just grabbed his kit. The ghost was being summoned, and he knew he wasn't done. November 1951, Hill 355. The terrain of Korea is a jagged, frozen landscape of impossible ridges. Hill 355, known as Little Gibraltar, is the strategic linchpin of the entire front. It is held by the Chinese People's Volunteer Army. Nearly 14,000 soldiers are dug into those heights, supported by heavy artillery. The Americans had tried to take it. They failed. They lost the hill to a massive counterattack. Then came Leo. He didn't bring a battalion. He brought 18 men. 18 hand-picked snipers and scouts who looked at Leo not as a commander, but as a force of nature. Under the cover of a freezing autumn fog, Leo leads his small team up the vertical slopes. They move with the same phantom logic he used in Zwolle. They don't attack the front, they become the terrain. They slip past sentries like smoke through a keyhole. When they reach the summit, Leo doesn't wait for a signal. He opens fire. For the next 3 days, Hill 355 becomes the site of a modern-day Thermopylae. The Chinese commanders are convinced they are being attacked by a massive force. How could 18 men create this much death? Leo is everywhere. Through the swirling mist and the snow, the one-eyed sniper works with a terrifying mechanical precision. The sight. He picks off officers at 500 yards in the middle of a blizzard. The sound, the rhythmic crack of his rifle, is the only heartbeat the Hill has left. The Chinese launch wave after wave of counterattacks. They send hundreds of men at a time to retake the crest. Leo stands his ground, refusing to retreat even when the enemy is close enough to smell their breath. He coordinates mortar fire via radio, calling the strikes in so close to his own position that the shrapnel dances at his feet. By the time reinforcements arrive, Leo and his 18 ghosts are still there. They have held the Hill against thousands. For this, Leo is awarded his second Distinguished Conduct Medal. He becomes the only Canadian and one of only 3 men in the history of the British Commonwealth to win the DCM in 2 different wars. The man who wouldn't die had done it again. When the guns finally fell silent in Korea, Leo Major went back to Montreal. He didn't write a memoir, he didn't go on a speaking tour. He returned to his job, to his wife Pauline, and to the quiet dignity of a man who knew exactly who he was. He didn't need the world to clap for him. He had already looked death in the eye and watched it blink. But there was one place where he was never just a pipe fitter. Every year, the people of Zwolle invited him back. To them, he wasn't a rebel or a bad boy. He was the man who saved their grandfathers. When Leo walked the streets of that Dutch city, thousands of people would line the sidewalks just to catch a glimpse of the man with the eye patch. He was a national hero in a country thousands of miles from his home. Leo lived until 2008, passing away at the age of 87. He left behind a legacy that sounds more like a comic book than a history textbook. So we return to the question from the beginning. Why did he refuse the medals? Why did he spit in the face of the Spartan general Montgomery? It wasn't because of arrogance. It wasn't because he hated authority. It was because Leo Major understood a truth that most of us never will. Loyalty isn't a piece of ribbon. His loyalty wasn't to the maps in the offices or the politicians in their pressed suits. His loyalty was to the boys in the dirt, to Willie Arsenault, who died in the shadows of Zwolle, to the 18 scouts who stood with him on a frozen hill in Korea, to the soldiers who didn't get to go home to Montreal. Leo didn't want a medal from a man who didn't bleed with him. He didn't need a general to tell him he was a hero because the ghosts of his brothers already knew. Leo Major was a man of cold steel and hot blood. He was a rebel, a pirate, and a protector. He proved that one man, armed with enough spite and a refusal to stay down, can change the course of history. History may forget names, and archives may gather dust, but the world never truly forgets the man who refuses to stay dead. And that is why they called him the soldier who wouldn't die.